we're at the end of the day. So we haven't waited a full 24 hours. We've waited 10 or so.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 hours. But the starter is rising so quickly that we need to feed it again before nighttime. So that's what Leah's going to do. She's going to dump out half or more of that, because now the starter is actually really quite active. It's really hungry, so we want to make sure to keep feeding it and essentially increasing the appetite of the little yeast microorganisms in there. The more we feed them, the faster they'll eat.
That's probably good.
So we want to keep that's great. We can't.
Oh, it's pretty stinky now.
Yeah, it's going to start having a bit of a different smell.
Okay.
All right, let's throw some fresh flour and water in there.
Just a scoop.
Big scoop.
1 sec, Isla.
Just
Can I have my mom?
Yes. Okay. Big scoop and then some water as well?
Yeah, big scoop. A little splash of water. You don't need much water usually at this point, because now the starter is so liquidy, there's a lot of moisture in it. And again, we're shooting for thick peanut butter, or heavier, like you can get it to a really doughy consistency.
So this consistency is probably okay?
Yeah, because it'll start out thick,
Yeah.
and as the yeast processes the fresh
Yeah, it gets
dough,
liquidier.
it becomes a lot liquidier.
Okay.
And that's going to come into play later when we're shaping when we're creating our actual bread dough. We're going to have to account for that. As the dough matures, it becomes more slack. So we want to be able to start off with a stiffer dough to account for that, and to have enough strength left in the dough to shape it later.
Okay.
One thing to start kind of keeping an eye on now. And
Is that pretty good?
we're looking good in there. Yep, that looks great.
All right.
So we'll loosely cover that and we'll look at it again in the morning. So the starter has already doubled, and it's only been a few hours. I don't want it to overproof, where the yeast eats more than it's capable of, or than we're capable of feeding it in a timely fashion. So I'm going to put it in the fridge. That'll slow things down overnight, and we'll have a look at the starter again in the morning. But so far we've got some really nice rising happening really quickly, so we can afford to put that in the fridge and slow it down a little bit. It is morning. I've pulled the starter out of the fridge, and it may have risen a tiny bit more in the fridge, but not much. So right now I've given it a smell. I've taken the lid off, and it's probably better lighting here. I've given it a smell, and I'm not very happy with how this one smells. It smells like pancake batter, and I want it to have a more sour, floral, almost alcohol-y and a little bit vinegary smell. Not sure why it's still got this pancakey smell, so I'm going to leave it out. And I know it has a bit longer to ferment, because if we look in at the top, we're not seeing those bubbles that we saw when it was really nicely fermented yesterday. So that tells me that there's still a bit of fermentation yet to happen, so we'll leave it out and let that go. And hopefully we'll get lots of bubbles in through the top, and that's confirmed by looking at the sides. And let me just get a shot of that, where there's still some dense flour at the top of the dough that has yet to have bubbles make their way up to it. The middle is nice and bubbly, the top looks too dense still, so there's still some rising to happen. We'll let that take place, and then we'll come back and take the next steps.